Hello there, everybody. So today I'm going to be covering a topic which I've been mulling around for a little while now. And as you guys may or may not know, I'm doing this by live format first, and then I will upload the live format to YouTube. So if you guys didn't know that that's how things are being done right now, that's how things are being done right now. And I really wanted to talk to you guys about this subject because this is something that has come up in a number of different ways, and that is to do with the sexual self, kind of, the art, the representation of the naked sexual self, and then art around the goddess Morrigan, and how it is too sexual, and it's a misnomer that she's a sexual goddess and all the rest of it. So that was first brought up over a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and I kind of looked at it and I was umming and ahhing about it, and there's been a number of different statements about this, and then they came into another light when one of the William Waterhouse's nymphs paintings was removed from an art gallery, and there's kind of a debate as to whether or not this was to do with censorship, this was to do with making a discussion, why this was so, and that people were saying that you will never out-heart Chris. Are you two having like heart fights down? Hi guys. So this happened in an art gallery, and it was the idea that these naked nymphs were too young, and there was this modern weird skew put on like the sexual nature of these nymphs, and it was inappropriate. And bearing in mind this is old Victorian artwork, it's beautiful artwork, and it represents stories from Greek mythology. And like there was this weird modern slant about whether or not it was appropriate to have these nude paintings of women, younger style women, nymphs, on display as art. And I was looking at this and I was like rolling my eyes because, one, I'm a big protector, stander for women's rights. You know, I will stand up for women's rights as much as I can. Two, I'm a survivor of abuse. So when I was looking at people being like, this artwork, it means that women will be attacked and stuff, and I was like, what is going on? Like, there are real issues which actually feed into misogyny and like real sexual objectification. This is not one of them. We need art. And I posted this as a status the other day, and I'm going to reiterate it here. The human condition needs art. Art is meant to be expansive of the mind. Art is meant to be something which challenges your perception. Art can even disgust you. Art can evoke an emotional response. It can be something which, creates a feeling of fear, creates a feeling of shock, a feeling of horror. And I'm laughing because the guys below right now are like trying to out-heart each other in the Facebook comments. Anyway, so art is meant to be evocative. It's meant to get a response from you. It's not necessarily meant to be, and in fact, it's not meant to be within comfortable limits. Art doesn't necessarily have to make sense to you. It's just supposed to evoke a reaction. And censoring artwork because of this weird thing that's going on, like, no, that's sexual, no, that's naked, no, is really damaging to my mind. I think there are places where sexual objectification happens, sure, but when we're talking about artwork, it's the presentation of all facets of the human condition. There's also this modern body shaming thing, which is basically being placed on artwork and other things. So people are trying to censor artwork to the idea that, like, this modern weird thing that the humans, I don't know, how do we put this? Like, in modern times, there's this weird push-pull thing with sexuality. Like, on the one hand, there's like this overt sexual thing being pushed in our faces, quite often through like advertising, and then on the other hand, there's like this sexual thing is something to be ashamed of, like back behind closed doors, don't talk about it, don't be in your power with your sexuality. And it's a really weird thing that happens in society. And so when you see like historical art or art in general being suppressed because of these weird standards that are coming forth, it's really quite scary. It kind of reminds me of like book burnings and like trying to take us back to the Stone Ages, or, you know, I don't know, like probably not the Stone Ages. They were probably more free with their artwork. But still, yeah, like, why is this happening? Why is this getting in the way? And I had commented on the original post, like, I think it's because we live in a society which demonizes breastfeeding on the one hand as women being too overtly sexual in public, which is, you know, and ridiculous. And on the other hand, there's like, boob is selling everything. And I get it. I get that, you know, there's an uncomfortable conversation around sexuality and how much is too much or whatever. And ultimately, I think it depends on where your line is. And if art and such is making you deeply uncomfortable, then maybe that's an examination of self that needs to happen there. So Molly says sex as a product is good, the body as a vessel for spectrum of sexual expression is bad. That's what's basically happened in society. Yeah, exactly. And basically, if you're kind of feeding the, I don't know, the capitalist machine with your body, that's fine. If you're like serving someone else with it, it's fine. But if you are embodying strength and power in an individual sense, then it becomes a problem. And I really wonder how much of that is what's happening. Like when you are sexually embodying your own power, then that's a threat outside of yourself, whereas when you're using your body to sell stuff which helps, you know, big business owners, the community, the society and such, then maybe it's not so much as a problem. It's a weird thing that's happening. Yeah, I honestly feel like there is a self-empowerment thing, like trying to squash the self-empowerment of people. And it's not just women. It's not just women, because there's a weird sexual thing that goes on with guys too. Like you have to look a certain way. You have to be like bulked up to be, you know, naked in presence. And there's no like middle ground. There's no showing of all nakedness. And art is actually one of the places where that is an exception, because whilst you have your Apollos and your statues of Greek gods, who by the way aren't particularly well endowed most of the time, you do still get art of a rendition of all body types, which is true in artwork for men and women, which is an interesting thing as why that's being censored. So that's been happening in the world in general. And I feel like we can't censor art because we're censoring creativity, we're censoring a conversation, we're censoring a dialogue, and that's really not helpful to who we are as human beings. It goes against the evolutionary process. If we cannot bear to look at artwork because there are nipples on it, I don't know what we're doing as people. Like, why have we got to the point when the nipple is offensive? And this goes into like free the nipple with artwork on Facebook and all that. Like, are you highly offended by nipples? Is anybody highly offended by nipples? Like, seriously, was anybody ever highly offended by nipples? And if so, why? Why are nipples like their skin? Like, I don't get it. Just female nipples though. Male nipples are fine. There's barely any difference. I mean, there's a difference in what they biologically are doing, but other than that, they're still nipples. Regardless, anyway. So this was also a thing that happened in some Morrigan conversation recently, where people are arguing against the overly sexual statues of Morrigan, presenting an overly sexual representation of the goddess, which is quote unquote wrong because she's not a sexual goddess, and calling her a sexual goddess is doing a disservice to the goddess. There's been a number of different articles on the subject of whether or not the goddess is sexual. I'm just going to read this from Molly before we move on. That was the most interesting and unintended lesson of figure drawing class for me. Seeing normal naked bodies in a mundane setting totally changed my relationship with my own body. So I think what it is with the art discussion and what I'm going to talk about with the Morrigan statues, which are effectively artwork, is that we place our sort of, I don't even know, our baggage with sexuality on this discussion. And we're not talking about the fact that we have like societal baggage with sexuality. We're not having free and open conversation. And in fact, we're going backwards with how restrictive things are becoming. There's not enough of a celebration of sexuality in all its forms and discussing it. Now, I am not talking about abuse, because ultimately when you have a discussion about like liberation of sexuality, there's ultimately at least one person going, well, then you're justifying abuse. And Molly is in the chat up there. Molly Roberts is in the chat. That's where I was quoting her from, in the feed beneath this video. And so I really feel like our baggage is getting placed on it, and like the naked human form isn't necessarily, you know, sexual by itself. Like, nakedness is our natural state, and like we have built up society to be ashamed of that, and we have built up like the cover up your entire body, and there's been a cover up of your body because you belong to somebody in other places, and it's problematic. So with regards to the Morrigan side of this, there was discussions on whether or not the statues of the Morrigan were a misrepresentation of her because they were too sexual. And I was looking at the original, I think, was on Pathos, or the guy that I respect his opinions. He speaks very well. I mean, he did, however, say a lot of the comments aren't showing up. Okay, so apparently the comments are being weird because it's Facebook. Sorry about that, guys. So the original post about whether or not the Morrigan statues were too sexual was on Pathos, like I said, and I do respect the guy's work. I'm sorry if you guys can't see all the comments. I think it's Facebook being weird. That's bizarre. Okay. And I mean, he initially was like, I'm not going to stick to the law and a mythology, and then he kind of did. That was like the one thing. And I have a problem with sticking to the law so strictly that it doesn't allow for a dialogue of discussion of what today is. It didn't kind of cover the idea that you know, the Celts were recorded as going into battle naked, so it wasn't like a fully naked statue of the Morrigan with like battle paint maybe isn't necessarily sexual. It's just whether or not the individual is perceiving that to be in a sexual stance, to the point where we've actually gotten to the point where certain ways of positioning the body are considered to be sexually inviting, and certain ways are more of a warrior stance. And I guess that's again perception. And some things are considered to be more open and inviting, and some are not. And I think there's a dialogue that we can have with regards to body positioning as to whether or not that is inviting, or we've just become so flooded with all images of what is sexual and sexually inviting that we have been kind of like programmed to see that as sexual or not. Now, the first thing I'm going to say about statues with regards to any god or goddess is that they're artwork. Ultimately, statues of the Morrigan are artwork. So each person will have an individual interaction with that particular statue or painting, whatever it might be, and where it may or may not speak to one person, it will may or may not speak to other. And ultimately, artwork is subjective, and how we interact with that artwork is subjective based on our subjective interpretations of any given god or goddess. So that I don't feel like there's a right or wrong answer with regards to statues in particular. I will say that on a personal note, I don't like most statues of the Morrigan. The only statue that to date has really spoken to me is the one that I have over there, and it's the one where she's got like raven wings up the back and she's holding arms up, and there's a raven on her hand and an eel on her leg and a wolf on her breastplate. That's the only one that's spoken to me on a personal level thus far. nakedness is loaded, symbolic of so much more than sex, freedom, wildness, divinity, nature, vulnerability, bravery, etc., which is what Molly just said, and I guess that people can't really see. And Tracy says, being depicted naked can even be a metaphor for not having pretenses with you. Exactly. It can be a full-blown power thing to be naked. Because, and apart from anything, there's a Celtic, there's recordings of the Celts going into battle naked, just paint. Whether or not, or just like the problem is, from a historical / mythological perspective, is that history is recorded by the victors. And most of the Celtic mythology, as with many mythologies and stories, are written by the opposing side. Did they turn up to naked to battle? It's possible, but can we 100% say for certainty that we're not being misdirected by history being recorded by the victors, making them out to be wild barbarians and lesser than Romans because Romans were smart enough to wear armor and they weren't? We don't know that for sure. There is bias in history, and history is the recording of things by people. Mythology is even more loaded, especially given that the Celts weren't the ones that recorded their myths. The Christians were. So guess how unbiased that is. And then there is missing history. I once read a comment from someone who's like, I feel like we are missing so much Morrigan mythology. I feel like there was so much more. And I do too. I feel like that we were missing so much Morrigan mythology. But to go back to this idea of art and statues in the Morrigan. So I understand that some people really don't like what they see as over-commercialization of the Morrigan statues. I've seen people who really didn't like the Morrigan statue with the antler because antlers have, in their words, nothing to do with the Morrigan. I've seen people who really don't like, there's one that's softer and she's kind of got like a skirt thing on and it's too soft. It's not warlike enough for some people. Now, personally, I don't like the softer statues in the Morrigan. I like them to be a bit more ferocious in how they present themselves. But this is a personal choice, and I'm aware it's a personal choice. And I'm not going to tell anybody else that they are wrong in following the Morrigan and seeing the Morrigan and using that statue. Again, I feel that we were like slipping into dictating spirituality to people, and it's not helpful. And this kind of like we're dictating sexuality to people too. So the argument with the Morrigan and being sexual has had some interesting insights from people, and I think it's more telling about the people talking about it than it is about the goddess herself. So there are people like, she's not sexual. There's only 2 recorded examples that people will uphold. Now, I personally am pretty sure that there is an example of the babe aspect offering herself to 3 different guys, and she was like in a hag leper phase, like she showed herself to be ugly, and that one of them took her up on the opportunity and she turned into a beautiful woman, and he got blessings in this mythology. So I'm pretty sure that's another example, but the 2 that people are bringing up is there isn't something else I can think of actually. The 2 that people are bringing up is the one where Cuchulainn turned her down for her sexual things and then dagged her. There's the one where Mocha obviously has twins with her husband, so she obviously has sexual relations with him. But one of the overarching arguments that I've seen, and I'm a bit about it, is like, well, she's not a sexual goddess because she only was having sex with the Dagda and he was her husband. Like, does that stop you being sexual if you're sexually active with your life partner? I don't know. I feel like there's like this shame element being brought in from the way that we interpret sexuality now, and is then being applied to this argument, whilst simultaneously using the old law to back this up. And I'm like, I don't see that we need to dictate that the Morrigan is or isn't sexual. She's a goddess. Like, our interactions with sexuality are human, and she's beyond that. So I feel like she embodies the life forces, all of the life forces, the death force, the life force, the sex force, all of it, because she's a goddess. And the mythology is just one small part of how we interpret a goddess. And telling people she is not a sexual goddess because she only had sex on these 2 occasions that we know of from the mythology that we have, never mind all the mythology that we don't have, that was recorded by patriarchal monks who were against sexuality and didn't want women to be shown as being outside, outside their archetype of the good wife. It's a weird conversation. It's a really weird conversation that's going on, and I'm not entirely sure that it's helpful. So for me, the goddess Morrigan has been helping me throughout my life deal and overcome with sexual abuse. This has been something that I have been through and have, I don't want to say recovered from because it's not as easy as that, but it's my trial, my battle, my pain, my suffering. This is tied to that. Other things too, but that is like the abuse that I suffered and have reclaimed myself to a power. So that's a battle involved in that. And because of that, reclaiming my sexuality, becoming sexual, being able to trust again to be sexual was part of the reclaiming of self, reclaiming of power. These are all threads which the Morrigan to me is intrinsic to. Reclaiming power, reclaiming self, and kind of making the dialogue into something outside of that is damaging in my mind, because then sexuality becomes something to be ashamed of because the Morrigan isn't sexual. How dare you? Like, what? How dare you say that the goddess has sexual relations or is sexual in herself? Why? Because that detracts her power as a female goddess? Why is that the case? Nakedness, sexuality, and sexual empowerment are not weakness. Seeing beautiful depictions of artwork and just because they are naked doesn't offend my eyes as a survivor of sexual abuse. I don't look at pictures of artwork from the Victorian period and be like, that's gonna encourage sexual abuse. I'm like, the abusers in the world will justify their abuse any way they can. Doesn't matter what it is. Which is feeds into the LGBT argument I was having the other day. Like, abusers find excuses for the abuse, whatever it is. That beautiful artwork has been around for a very long time. The mythology we've handed down, in some cases, in the Greek cases, which is tied to the nymphs, has a patriarchal slant. It's been rewritten. They've been made into victims. This particular painting does not show nymphs as victims. They're all about to drown that dude's ass. They're not in a place of vulnerability. They're not in a place of weakness. I don't really know much more what I can say on this. I feel like that why are we even having the debate as to whether the goddess Morrigan is sexual as this being a wrong interpretation? I really don't feel like I enjoy the conversations where people are like, this is the wrong interpretation of the Morrigan, and the Morrigan will not talk to you about anything sexual. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not my personal experience with the goddess, because she has encouraged me to ramp up my sexuality, getting back to my true self in a healthy way, to reclaim my power. And why is it okay to be sexual within the confines of marriage to some people as a goddess, but not outside of that? Like, she's not a sexual goddess because she's married, or she only has sex at the point here, or mythology is a tricksy thing. There is interpretation. There is more interpretation. Now, I understand people do not want to see the goddess such as the Morrigan made into a sex kitten. I get it. I get that. I understand it. I don't like some of these statues either. I think that, I don't know, they're a little bit too, they basically portray the Morrigan in a modern sense of what is sexy, and I don't feel that that's necessary. I feel that, like, to capture the essence of something in art is a much better representation of deity. But this is me. This is me. This is how I want deity represented. And I'm not speaking for everybody who follows the Morrigan. That can't be done. So I'm going to leave it here, because I think that's a good kind of round way to kind of finish it. So thank you guys for coming. I'm sorry you guys can't see each other's comments, which I guess is Facebook being weird. There may be more comments, there may be less comments, I don't know. But thank you guys for joining me. This video will be up on YouTube following. So thank you guys for sitting with me today, and stay fluxy.